Welcome to the official podcast of Vienna Shadows, a secret society uncovering Vienna's hidden mysteries. Lean back and enjoy the show.
Welcome to The Debate.
Good to be here, ready to dissect the digital.
Tonight, we are stepping into the shadows of a city that sits on the knife edge of history. We're analyzing Vienna Shadows, dark tales.
Now, to the casual observer, this looks like a browser-based, pretty text-heavy RPG set in an alternate reality 1920s Vienna. You know, you solve mysteries, you manage your sanity, you try not to die.
Right, but if you stop looking at the surface and you start looking at the engine, you realize it's claiming to be something else entirely. The developers are calling it a unique human-AI collaboration. It's a platform where the fourth wall isn't just broken, it is completely demolished. Players are actually invited to use generative AI tools to write scenes, generate voiceovers, and fundamentally rewrite the game world in real time.
And that is exactly why I'm taking the position that Vienna Shadows represents a massive and I think revolutionary leap in interactive storytelling. By combining this deep, researched historical immersion with this player as editor mechanic, it democratizes game design. It creates a living, limitless universe where agency isn't just about choosing option A or B, it's about picking up the pen and writing option C yourself.
And I'm coming at it from a different angle. While I can admire the technical audacity, and, it is audacious, I'd argue that true horror, and specifically the cosmic horror this game is trying for, it requires strict curation. It needs a singular, terrifying vision. So I'm arguing that relying on AI generation and community editing just risks fracturing the narrative cohesion. When a game is built by everyone, using tools that generate content in seconds, I have to question whether it can maintain the heavy, oppressive atmosphere needed to actually scare anyone.
So we have the architect versus the author. All right, let's dive into the evidence. I want to start by grounding our listeners in what the actual gameplay loop feels like, because I think there's a misconception that this is just a sandbox with no rules. That's just not true.
It presents itself as a text adventure for sure.
It does, but the structure is rigorous. You start by creating a character, and this isn't just cosmetic. You choose a profession, a private detective, a university professor, maybe an investigative journalist. Then you have a pool of points to distribute into attributes: intellect, charisma, perception, and strength.
Okay, which is standard tabletop RPG fare. I mean, we've seen this since Dungeons & Dragons.
We have, but the implementation here is distinct because of how it interacts with the scene choice system. These stats are basically narrative keys. Let's say you're in a scene at a smoky underground jazz bar in the First District. The text describes the room. If you have high perception, the game text actually changes. You notice a man in the corner with a bronze amulet tucked under his coat. If your perception is low, that sentence literally doesn't exist for you. You just miss the clue entirely.
I grant you that the gating mechanics add a layer of replayability.
And consequence. You have to manage your inventory and your currency, shillings, very carefully. You might need to buy a copy of the Wiener Zeitung newspaper to crack a code. But the real tension, I think, comes from the two main resource pools, health and sanity. If your health drops to 0, the game is explicit. You die. If sanity drops to 0, you succumb to madness.
Okay, I understand the mechanics, but I want to challenge the feeling of them. You call this immersion. I look at the user interface and I see sanity, 1010, sitting there in a clean digital box. In true cosmic horror, think of Lovecraft's original stories or even the best survival horror games, insanity is a narrative descent. It's a blurring of reality, an unreliable narrator, a feeling of slipping away. Here, it's a resource management spreadsheet. Oh, I have 3 sanity left. I better not read this forbidden book. That's a strategic decision, sure. But is it scary, or is it just accounting?
I see why you'd think that, but let me offer a different perspective. Resource management creates fear. When you are down to 2 sanity, and you know that the next click could end your character's journey permanently, that creates this palpable, sweaty palm tension. You are gambling with your character's life on every single decision. That is a definition of agency.
But is the consequence really real? This is where your argument for agency clashes with the game's biggest selling point. The source material highlights that editors can edit every scene and choice. So if I walk into a trap that kills me and I'm frustrated, what's stopping me from just pausing the game, opening the editor, and rewriting the trap so it's just a harmless gust of wind?
Well, obviously there's a distinction between playing the narrative and building it. You don't edit while you're frantically trying to survive a Shoggoth in the sewers. You edit to build the trap for the next person. It's about contributing to the ecosystem. But I want to pivot to your point about the atmosphere because you called it a Frankenstein's monster in your opening. I think you're missing how grounded this game actually is.
I'm listening. But from what I've seen, it feels like a total mashup.
It is deeply, specifically Viennese. And this is where the source material advantage comes in. The game doesn't just use some generic 1920s backdrop. It leverages real-world legends. Take the Basilisk of Vienna at Schönladengasse 7.
The 13th century legend, the baker's apprentice?
Exactly. The story of the boy who defeated a basilisk using a mirror to reflect its gaze. That isn't a generic fantasy trope thrown in by an AI. That is a specific piece of Viennese folklore located at a specific address in the city. The game uses that. Or take the Friedhof der Namenlosen, the cemetery of the nameless, where bodies washed up from the Danube were buried.
A haunting location, I admit.
It is. And the game populates it with the White Lady of the Hofsburg Palace, who appears at 4 p.m. to predict tragedy. These are highly localized details. This sort of educational aspect creates a lived-in feeling that pure fiction just can't match. You feel the weight of the Habsburg Empire collapsing all around you.
That is a compelling argument for a historical game. If this were Vienna Shadows, the historical mysteries, I would be completely on board. But have you considered the clash? You have these beautiful, subtle Viennese legends like the Dawnweibchen, the Siren in the River, or Augustin the Bagpiper who survived the plague through sheer drunkenness. These are stories about human resilience and local tragedy. And then you drop Cthulhu on top of it?
Cosmic horror fits perfectly with post-war disillusionment. The empire has fallen, the old gods are dead, so why not introduce new, terrifying ones?
Because it creates a tonal mess. The game includes the Necronomicon and Miskatonic University right alongside Mozart's Requiem. It feels like a branding exercise, we need to make it scary, so let's throw in some tentacles. It cheapens the specific history. The legend of the masked messenger who commissioned Mozart's Requiem is a profound story about mortality and genius. When you mix that with Necronomicon lore, you aren't elevating the history, you're just diluting it with pop culture.
I disagree. I think it recontextualizes the history. But let's talk about how that context is built, because this brings us to the build feature. This is the game's unique selling point, and we need to explain how sophisticated this really is. It's not just typing a prompt into a box.
It is complex, I'll give you that. But complexity does not equal soul.
It equals possibility. The game is built on a custom content management system where registered players become editors. The editor mode allows for a flag system. For our listeners who aren't developers, think of a flag as like an invisible anchor or a sticky note attached to your character.
Go on.
You can set a condition based on a player's decision. If a player chooses to help a stranger in scene A, you plant a flag, helped stranger. 3 chapters later, scene Z checks for that flag. If it's there, a new ally appears. If it's not, you face the boss alone. That is logical programming made accessible to people who are not coders.
Right. I see the utility. It allows for branching narratives that actually remember what you did.
It allows for deep branching. You can set requirements for choices like needing intellect greater than 4 or possessing the bronze amulet. You can even make profession-specific choices. A private detective sees a clue that a university professor doesn't. And the integration of tools is seamless. They're using Google Gemini for text and image generation and 11 Labs for text-to-speech.
Which means
Which means a user can write a dialogue line for a gritty detective, click a button, and immediately, within seconds, hear it spoken in a gravelly, period-accurate voice. It lowers the barrier to entry for game design to almost zero. You don't need to hire a voice actor. You don't need to be an artist. You just need an idea.
okay, that's a compelling argument for the creator. But I'm sorry, I just don't buy that accessibility excuses the ethical and quality concerns here. Let's look at the terms of service and privacy policy found in the source material. This is where the whole democratization argument hits a wall for me.
They're pretty standard GDPR-compliant policies. I checked the documentation.
Are they, though? Look closer at the content ownership clauses. It says, and I'm quoting here, "Scene edits made by you will stay in the game in order to maintain playability, even if you delete your account."
Well, sure, of course.
Think about what that actually means. You are essentially providing free labor to build their ecosystem. You write the story, you debug the flags, you generate the art using their API keys, and once you submit it, it's theirs to keep the game functional. You are the product, and you are the workforce.
But that's necessary for a persistent world. You can't have a giant hole in the story just because one user got bored and left. If I write a crucial bridge scene that connects the sewers to the palace, and then I delete my account, the player who comes after me is stuck in a void. The license has to be irrevocable for the game to function mechanically. It's not exploitation, it's infrastructure.
It's necessary for the product, I'll grant you that. But it raises the question, is this a game or is it a platform for unpaid prompt engineering? The game boasts about being a unique human-AI collaboration, but it feels like the human element is being relegated to quality control for the machine. I look at the Appendix 2 About Us section. It says content was created with technology from Google, OpenAI, Manus, Lovable.dev. If the computer writes the code, generates the image, and synthesizes the voice, does the game even have a soul?
The soul comes from the curation. The About Us also says, now it is up to the humans to shape its future. That is an invitation. And frankly, the tools they provide allow for a level of customization and inclusion we've never seen from big studios. They even account for accessibility in a way that is genuinely impressive.
You mean the dark mode?
No, I mean deep integration. They offer screen reader compatibility, which is rare enough. But here's a key AI feature that actually helps people. Every single AI-generated image automatically gets alt text generated for it. And then, editors can manually refine that text.
That is actually quite smart.
It's brilliant. It ensures that visually impaired players can experience the atmosphere of the dawn of Wavekin or the horror of a Shoggoth just as vividly as anyone else. The AI handles the grunt work of describing the image, and the human refines it. Plus, they let you play locally without registering if you care about data privacy. You only need an account to cross-save or to edit. That is a respectful approach to user data.
I agree, those are good features. Accessibility is essential, and using LLMs to generate alt text is a clever use of the tech. But let's pivot back to the narrative content for a second. The mission statement mentions an open franchise model. They say there are no limits in media formats, and they provide the framework. It is open to all.
Which is exciting. It means the story can go anywhere. It's not locked down by one writer's block.
Or it means the story goes everywhere and nowhere at the same time. If I'm playing a mystery, I want a solution. I want a narrative arc designed by a master storyteller who knows where the clues lead. If the mystery of the masked messenger is left up to user 123 to finish, and they decide it was actually an alien from Yuggoth because they thought it would be funny, the mystery is ruined.
That's a very cynical take on creativity.
Is it, though? The open franchise model works for sandboxes, like Minecraft. But does it work for dark tales? Horror requires secrets. If everyone knows the secret because everyone is an editor, is there any mystery left?
But that's assuming the worst of the community. Look at the folklore itself. The masked messenger legend, which the source material notes was actually a fabrication by Mozart's widow to raise money, is a perfect example of how stories evolve. Folklore is open source. The legend of the Stockham Eisen, the tree trunk full of nails in Vienna, evolved from a votive offering to a journeyman tradition to a devil myth over centuries. Vienna Shadows is simply accelerating that process. It's letting the community build the folklore of the game in real time.
That is an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. Folklore evolves organically over centuries through oral tradition. It's filtered through generations of human experience. This is forced evolution, using predictive text algorithms. There's a big difference between a legend growing because a grandmother told it to her grandson and a legend growing because someone typed a prompt into Gemini and hit generate.
But the mechanism of building is what makes it a game. For today, we are in an era where players demand agency. They don't just want to ride the ride, they want to build the track. The editor features adding items, setting effects, creating new story paths. They turn the player into a dungeon master. And for a single-player experience, that is unique. You are playing against the collective imagination of every other editor.
Or you are playing against the chaotic jumble of conflicting tones. I look at the bad luck cat of the Katzenstein house, mentioned in the lore, a spectral white cat that brings misfortune. Simple, elegant, scary.
It's a classic Viennese ghost story.
Exactly. But if I'm playing that scene and suddenly I have an option to pull out a Tommy gun and shoot it because an editor added a combat mechanic that the base game didn't really intend, the mood is shattered. The horror is gone.
But the scene information panel shows strict controls. You can set requirements. You can't just do anything. This system has rules. And the privacy policy explicitly states they use HCAPTCHA and verify accounts. There is structure here. It isn't anarchy.
Structure, yes, but is there art? That's the fundamental disagreement.
I believe the art is in the collaboration.
And I believe the art is lost in the automation.
We're coming to the end of our time, so let's bring this to a head. For me, Vienna Shadows, Dark Tales is a triumph because it recognizes that the future of gaming is participatory. It takes the rich, historical tapestry of 1920s Vienna, the fiacres rattling down cobblestones, the coffee houses like Café Central, the grim legends of Blood Alley, and it just hands it to the player. It says, here is a world of cosmic horror and stats. Here are the tools to expand it. Go. It manages to be both a tight RPG with sanity mechanics and a boundless creative platform.
And for me, it remains a fascinating technical skeleton waiting for a soul. It's an impressive framework, certainly. The integration of Gemini and 11 Labs is seamless, and the flag system is a brilliant way to teach logic. But by trying to be everything, a historical drama, a Lovecraftian horror, a creative sandbox, and a tech demo, it risks being nothing specific. Horror requires the unknown, and Vienna Shadows invites you to know and to edit everything. It's a sandbox for creators, yes, but players looking for a curated, terrifying narrative might just find it too disjointed to truly lose themselves in the shadows.
A living fiction versus a curated nightmare. I suspect the answer lies in who's holding the mouse.
Or who wrote the prompt.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us on The Debate.
Until next time.
This concludes today's episode. Don't forget to rate and subscribe. Until next time, Vienna Shadows, signing off.